She never imagined that losing a single envelope could destroy everything her mother had worked for. Within seconds, the weight of her family's future slipped through her fingers, and panic clawed at her chest like a living thing. How could she go home and tell her widowed mother that the tuition money, scraped together from endless night shifts and borrowed hopes, was gone? How could she face the disappointment in those tired eyes? Nobody walking past her on that busy Ohio street could have guessed what was about to happen next. A sacrifice so profound it would echo across decades and change two families forever. This is Nemi's story, where African folktales meet real-life lessons that will change how you see the world. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these stories alive. Now, let's begin. Lily Anderson was 12 years old when her world started crumbling. She stood frozen on the corner of Maple and 5th Street in her small Ohio town, her hands trembling as she searched through her backpack for the third time. The envelope wasn't there. $300, her entire school tuition for the semester, had vanished somewhere between the bank and home. Her mother, Sarah Anderson, had worked double shifts at the diner for months to save that money. After Lily's father died 2 years earlier, everything became a calculation of pennies and prayers. New shoes. Maybe next month. A winter coat? The old one could last another year. But education? That was sacred. That was the one thing Sarah refused to compromise on. Education is your ladder out of here, baby, her mother always said, her hands raw from washing dishes. Don't ever let anyone take that from you. And now Lily had lost it herself. Tears streamed down her face as she retraced her steps, checking every crack in the sidewalk, every gutter, every doorway. Nothing. The envelope had probably blown away in the wind, or someone had picked it up and disappeared into the afternoon crowd. Either way, it was gone, and with it, Lily's chance to stay in school. She sat down on a bench outside an old hardware store, her small shoulders shaking with sobs. People walked past. Some glanced at her with concern, others looked away quickly, uncomfortable with a child's public distress. Nobody stopped. Nobody asked if she was okay. Until Walter Briggs noticed her. Walter was 73 years old, with silver hair that caught the sunlight and hands that told stories of decades spent crafting and repairing shoes. Once, he'd owned a small shoe repair shop on Cherry Street. Nothing fancy, but it was his, and it was enough. Then his landlord sold the building to developers, and Walter couldn't afford the new rent. His workshop was demolished to make room for a parking garage. Now he worked from a makeshift stand on the corner, just a wooden crate, some tools, and a hand-painted sign that read, "Shoe repairs. Honest work. Fair prices." His grandson Ethan, a quiet 8-year-old boy with his grandfather's kind eyes, sat beside him doing homework on cardboard spread across his lap. Walter had noticed the crying girl from across the street. Something about her desperation pulled at his heart, the same desperation he'd seen in the mirror after losing his shop. He shuffled across the road, his joints aching with each step, and sat down beside her on the bench. "Little lady," he said gently, "what's got you crying like the world's ending?" Lily looked up at this stranger, an elderly black man with worn clothes and gentle eyes, and something about his face made her trust him. Between hiccups and tears, she told him everything. The tuition money, her mother's sacrifices, the impossible situation she now faced. Walter listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring at his weathered hands. "How much did you lose?" he asked finally. $300, Lily whispered. "It might as well be 3 million. We don't have it." Walter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small cloth bag. Inside was his savings, money he'd been setting aside coin by coin, bill by bill, from his street corner repairs. It had taken him 8 months to save $320. He'd been planning to rent a small room for himself and Ethan before winter came. The nights were getting colder, and sleeping in the shelter was hard on the boy. But looking at this child's tear-stained face, Walter knew what he had to do. "Here," he said, pressing the cloth bag into her hands. "Take it. All of it." Lily's eyes widened. I can't. This is yours. You need it. Child, listen to me." Walter's voice was firm but kind. "I'm an old man. I've lived my life. But you've got your whole future ahead of you. Education is everything. It's the one thing nobody can ever take from you once you've got it. You take this money, you go to school, and you make something beautiful of your life. That's how you repay me, by not wasting this chance. But what about you? Lily asked, tears flowing again, this time from gratitude and disbelief. Walter smiled. God takes care of old shoe repair men. You just take care of your education. Lily threw her arms around him, sobbing thank yous into his shoulder. Walter patted her back gently, then watched as she ran down the street toward home, clutching the cloth bag like it held the world's greatest treasure. Across the street, young Ethan looked at his grandfather with confused eyes. Grandpa, that was our room money. Walter walked back to their corner stand and ruffled his grandson's hair. That was our seed money, Ethan. We just planted something good. You watch, God's going to grow something beautiful from it. Neither of them could have known how right he was, or how long it would take for that harvest to come. 3 weeks after Walter gave away his savings, the city came for his corner stand. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of crisp autumn day that should have been peaceful. Walter and Ethan had just set up their wooden crate and tools when 2 city officials appeared, followed by a demolition crew in bright orange vests. This is an unauthorized street vending operation, the lead official announced, barely looking at Walter. City Ordinance 472. You're in violation. This structure needs to be removed immediately. Walter's heart sank. Sir, please. This is all I have. I'm just fixing shoes. I'm not hurting anyone. Rules are rules, old man. You should have gotten a permit. The official waved to his crew. Clear it out. Within minutes, Walter's modest stand, his crate, his tools, his hand-painted sign, was loaded into a city truck and hauled away. They took everything except the shoes on his feet and Ethan's backpack. Walter stood on the empty corner, his grandson's small hand gripped tight in his, watching his last means of survival disappear down the street. Grandpa, Ethan's voice was small, frightened. What do we do now? Walter had no answer. That night, they couldn't afford the shelter fee. They slept behind a church, huddled together under Walter's thin coat, listening to the city breathe around them. Ethan tried not to cry, but Walter felt the boy's body shaking against his. It's going to be okay, Walter whispered, though he wasn't sure he believed it anymore. God hasn't forgotten us. Meanwhile, across town in the Anderson household, something extraordinary was happening. Sarah Anderson stood in her tiny kitchen, staring at the television screen in complete disbelief. The lottery numbers scrolled across the bottom. 5, 17, 23, 34, 41, 49, and in her trembling hand was a ticket bearing those exact numbers. She'd bought it on impulse with her last $2. The same day Lily came home with the mysterious story about a kind stranger who'd given her tuition money. Lily, Sarah's voice cracked. Lily, get down here. 12-year-old Lily rushed downstairs, alarmed by her mother's tone. Mom? What's wrong? Sarah couldn't speak. She just pointed at the television, then at the ticket, then at the television again. Lily looked between them, her young mind struggling to process what this meant. Mom, did we? $18 million, Sarah whispered. We just won $18 million. The room spun. Mother and daughter grabbed each other, and this time when they cried, it was from overwhelming, impossible joy. Everything was about to change. And it did, faster than either of them could have imagined. Within months, the Andersons moved from their cramped apartment to a beautiful home in the wealthy suburbs. Sarah quit the diner and started a charitable foundation. Lily transferred to the best private school in the state, where she excelled in business and economics. She never forgot her mother's values, or the elderly shoemaker who'd sacrificed everything for a stranger's child. Mom, Lily said one evening, years later, as she prepared to leave for college. I want to find him. Mr. Briggs. The man who gave me his savings. I want to thank him properly. Sarah nodded, her eyes misty. I've been trying, sweetheart. I've hired investigators, posted notices, searched everywhere. It's like he vanished. What they didn't know was that Walter Briggs had indeed vanished, not by choice, but by circumstance. He and Ethan had spent 3 harsh years on the streets, moving from shelter to shelter, sometimes sleeping in parks or abandoned buildings. Walter's health deteriorated, his joints ached constantly, and a persistent cough settled in his chest that wouldn't leave. But he made sure Ethan stayed in school. Every morning, Walter walked the boy to the public school entrance, making sure he looked as clean and presentable as possible. Every evening, he helped with homework by streetlight or library lamp. Education remained sacred, even when everything else had fallen apart. "Why do we have to keep going, Grandpa?" Ethan asked one bitter winter night, his 14-year-old voice heavy with exhaustion. "What's the point?" Walter looked at his grandson with fierce love. "Because I gave away everything we had so a little girl could stay in school. I'm not going to let my own grandson quit." "You're going to make something of yourself, Ethan. You're going to prove that sacrifices mean something." Those words became Ethan's anchor through the hardest years of his life. By the time Ethan turned 19, he'd managed to graduate high school despite their circumstances. He was tall now, with his grandfather's kind eyes and a quiet determination forged in struggle. Walter, now 79, was frail and increasingly sick, but still fiercely proud of his grandson. Then fortune shifted again, just slightly, just enough. Ethan saw a job posting at an employment center, driver needed for prominent businesswoman. Good pay, housing provided. He applied immediately, desperate for the stability that could finally get his grandfather off the streets. The interview was at a mansion that made Ethan's breath catch. He was led into an elegant office where a powerful, sophisticated woman sat behind a mahogany desk, Madame Victoria Carter, a real estate mogul known throughout Ohio. "You're very young," Victoria observed, studying his application. "I'm responsible," Ethan replied quietly. "I've been taking care of my grandfather since I was 8. I know how to work hard, and I won't let you down." Something in his humble sincerity impressed her. "You're hired. You'll drive my daughter primarily. She's building her own business empire. She needs someone reliable and discreet." "Your daughter?" Ethan asked. Victoria smiled. "Lily Anderson Carter. I think you two will get along well." Ethan had no idea that this job, this seemingly random opportunity, was the beginning of the harvest Walter had planted 7 years earlier. The seeds of kindness, buried in sacrifice and watered with suffering, were finally about to bloom. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Lily Anderson Carter was 24 years old, brilliant, and driven by a purpose that went beyond wealth. While other young heirs wasted their fortunes on parties and luxury, Lily built businesses that created jobs and opportunities for struggling families. She'd launched 3 successful ventures, a scholarship program, a microfinance company, and a chain of vocational training centers. But every success felt incomplete. There was a void she couldn't fill, a debt she couldn't repay. Somewhere out there was an elderly shoemaker who'd given everything for her future, and despite years of searching, hiring investigators, and posting advertisements, she'd never found Walter Briggs. "Maybe he moved away," her mother suggested gently. "Maybe he doesn't want to be found. Or maybe he needs help and I'm not there," Lily countered, frustration edging her voice. "Mom, that man gave me his entire savings. Everything he had. While we're living in mansions, he could be suffering somewhere, and I can't find him to make it right." It haunted her, this unpaid debt of gratitude that grew heavier with each passing year. When Ethan became her driver, Lily was initially just polite and professional. But there was something different about him, a humility and kindness that reminded her of someone, though she couldn't quite place who. He never asked for special treatment, never gossiped about her family's wealth, and always had a gentle word for the staff others overlooked. "Ethan," she asked one afternoon as he drove her to a business meeting, "you always seem so thoughtful. What shaped you that way?" Ethan glanced at her through the rearview mirror, surprised by the personal question. "My grandfather, ma'am. He taught me that character matters more than circumstances. Even when we had nothing, he insisted on dignity and kindness. He sounds like an extraordinary man." "He is," Ethan said softly, "though he's not well these days. I'm finally able to take care of him properly now, thanks to this job." Over the following months, Lily and Ethan developed an unexpected friendship. Despite their different worlds, they connected over shared values, hard work, gratitude, and the belief that success meant nothing if you didn't lift others up. Lily found herself confiding in him about her fruitless search for the shoemaker who'd changed her life. "I was 12 years old and terrified," she told him one evening after a long day. "I'd lost my tuition money, and this elderly man gave me everything he'd saved. $320. It doesn't sound like much now, but it was his whole world. He told me education was everything, that nobody could take it from me once I had it. Those words shaped my entire life, Ethan. And I can't find him to say thank you." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Something about her story stirred a distant memory. His grandfather coming back to their corner stand that day, his savings bag empty, talking about a crying girl and tuition money. But it couldn't be the same incident, could it? What was his name? Ethan asked carefully. Walter Briggs. He was a shoemaker. He worked from a street corner with his grandson. The car swerved slightly. Ethan pulled over, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst through his chest. He turned to face Lily, his eyes wide with shock. Miss Anderson Carter. What year did this happen? 7 years ago. September. I was 12. What? Ethan's voice came out as barely a whisper. My grandfather's name is Walter Briggs. He was a shoemaker. 7 years ago, he gave away all his savings to a young girl who'd lost her tuition money. I was 8 years old, sitting beside him when he did it. The air seemed to leave the car. Lily stared at Ethan, her mind racing through the impossible mathematics of coincidence and fate. You're the grandson? And you're the girl who got his savings. For a long moment, neither of them could speak. Tears streamed down Lily's face as the weight of 7 years of searching suddenly lifted. She'd been riding in a car with Walter's grandson for months, never knowing the connection between them. Where is he? Lily asked urgently. Ethan, I need to see him. Please. He's at the boarding house where we live, Ethan said, still dazed. But Miss Anderson Carter, you should know, we've been homeless for most of these 7 years. After he gave you his savings, the city demolished his stand. We lost everything. We've only been off the streets for 3 months since I got this job. And he's not well. He's sick and frail, and I'm trying my best, but... Take me to him, Lily interrupted, her voice fierce with determination. Right now? Please, Ethan. Take me to him. 20 minutes later, they stood outside a rundown boarding house in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. Lily's heart broke seeing where the man who'd saved her future had been forced to live. They climbed 3 flights of creaky stairs to a small room with peeling paint and a single window. Walter Briggs sat in an old armchair, wrapped in a thin blanket despite the summer heat. He'd aged dramatically, his silver hair now white and sparse, his once strong frame diminished by years of hardship and illness. But his eyes, though tired, still held that gentle spark of kindness. Grandpa, Ethan said softly, kneeling beside the chair. There's someone here to see you. Someone you met a long time ago. Walter looked up at the elegant young woman standing in his doorway, confusion crossing his weathered face. Then Lily stepped forward, tears streaming freely, and spoke words she'd been holding for 7 years. Mr. Briggs, my name is Lily Anderson. 7 years ago, when I was 12 years old and crying on a bench, you gave me all your savings so I could stay in school. You told me education was everything. You told me to make something beautiful of my life. Her voice broke. I've been searching for you ever since. I needed to find you. I needed to say thank you. Walter's eyes widened, recognition slowly dawning. His hand trembled as he reached toward her. The little girl, the tuition money, that was you? Lily took his frail hand in both of hers and knelt beside him, just as she'd hugged him on that street corner years ago. That was me. And you saved my life, Mr. Briggs. You saved everything. Walter began to cry. Deep, shaking sobs that released 7 years of struggle and sacrifice. Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them, and the 3 of them stayed that way, connected by a circle of kindness that had finally, impossibly, completed itself. The harvest Walter had planted was about to come home. The morning after their reunion, Lily arrived at the boarding house with her mother Victoria, a doctor, and a plan that had kept her awake all night. She couldn't undo 7 years of suffering, but she could transform what came next. Walter protested weakly from his chair. Child, you don't owe me anything. You already repaid me by making something of yourself. That was the deal. Lily knelt beside him again, taking his weathered hand. Mr. Briggs, you gave me everything when you had nothing. You planted a seed in my life that grew into forests. Now it's harvest time, and you're going to let me share it with you. Please. It's not about debt, it's about love. The doctor examined Walter thoroughly while Lily and Victoria spoke with Ethan in the hallway. He has pneumonia, severe arthritis, and malnutrition, Lily told him gently. He needs immediate medical care and a proper place to recover. I've already arranged everything. Miss Anderson Carter, I can't let you. Ethan, Victoria interrupted, her voice kind but firm. My daughter has been searching for your grandfather for 7 years. She's used every resource at her disposal. Do you know why? Because his sacrifice didn't just give her tuition money. It gave her a purpose. Everything she's built, every business, every scholarship program, was inspired by one old shoemaker who believed education mattered more than his own comfort. Let her do this. Let her close this circle. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He'd carried the weight of caring for his grandfather alone for so long, watching him deteriorate while feeling helpless. Now, suddenly, miraculously, help had arrived in the form of the little girl his grandfather had saved. By that evening, Walter was admitted to the city's best private hospital. Lily spared no expense: specialists, round-the-clock care, medications, physical therapy. Within weeks, color returned to Walter's cheeks. The pneumonia cleared. His pain became manageable. For the first time in years, he could breathe easily and sleep without coughing through the night. But Lily wasn't finished. 1 month later, she brought Walter and Ethan to a beautiful neighborhood on the city's peaceful east side. Tree-lined streets, well-maintained homes, children playing in yards. It looked like a dream compared to where they'd been living. She stopped in front of a charming 2-story house with a wraparound porch and a small garden. "What do you think?" she asked Walter, who sat in the passenger seat staring at the house with confusion. "It's beautiful," he said. "Whose is it?" Lily handed him a set of keys and a deed with his name on it. "Yours. Completely paid for. No mortgage, no rent. This is your home, Mr. Briggs. Yours and Ethan's. Forever." Walter's hands shook as he held the keys. "Child, I can't. This is too much." "It's not even close to enough," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me your future when I needed it. Now I'm giving you the comfort and dignity you deserve. Please, Mr. Briggs, let me do this. You taught me that education was everything. Well, I got that education, and I learned that blessings are meant to be shared." They helped Walter inside. The house was fully furnished. Comfortable chairs for his aching joints, a bedroom on the ground floor so he wouldn't need stairs, a kitchen stocked with food, and a workshop in the garage filled with shoe repair tools and supplies. Walter stood in the workshop doorway and wept. "I can work again," he whispered. "After all these years, I can work with my hands again." "Only if you want to," Lily said gently. "But you'll never have to work another day in your life. You have a monthly stipend, more than enough for anything you need. You've earned your rest, Mr. Briggs." But for Ethan, Lily had different plans. Not rest, but opportunity. "You're 19, brilliant, and you've overcome more than most people face in a lifetime," she told him over dinner at her family's home that evening. "You've been my driver for 6 months, and I've seen your character, your intelligence, your potential. So here's what's going to happen. I'm paying for your college education. Full scholarship. Business management, engineering, whatever you want to study. And when you graduate, there's a position waiting for you in my company. Not because of your grandfather, but because you've earned it." Ethan couldn't speak. He just stared at her, overwhelmed. "I'm also setting up a trust fund for your grandfather's medical care and living expenses for the rest of his life," Lily continued. "You'll never have to worry about taking care of him again. You can focus on building your own future now." "Why?" Ethan finally managed. "Why are you doing all this?" Lily smiled through her tears. "Because 7 years ago, your grandfather taught me that one person's kindness can change everything. He showed me that real wealth isn't what you keep, it's what you give away when it costs you everything. I'm just following his example." Over the following years, something beautiful unfolded. Walter lived in comfort and dignity, repairing shoes in his garage workshop, not because he had to, but because he loved the craft. Neighborhood children would visit, fascinated by the elderly shoemaker who could fix anything and always had a kind word. Ethan graduated with honors and joined Lily's company, proving himself as a talented and compassionate business leader. He and Lily grew closer, their friendship deepening into something more, a love built on shared values, mutual respect, and a history that defied coincidence. 3 years after their reunion, Ethan proposed to Lily in Walter's garden, with both families present. Walter cried tears of joy as the young man he'd raised and the young woman he'd saved pledged their lives to each other. "You see," Walter said to his grandson that evening, his voice strong and clear now. "I told you God would grow something beautiful from that seed. I just never imagined it would be this." At the wedding, Walter stood proudly as Ethan's best man, wearing a suit Lily had bought him and shoes he'd repaired himself, because some traditions mattered. In his toast, he said simply, "7 years ago, I gave away everything I had because I believed education could change a life. Today, I see that one small act of faith created a harvest bigger than anything I could have imagined." When you plant kindness, you never know what forests will grow. The reception hall erupted in applause and tears. Lily and Ethan built their life together on the foundation their story had laid: generosity, sacrifice, and the unshakable belief that blessings always find their way home. They expanded Lily's charitable work, focusing on homeless families and struggling workers, making sure nobody else had to suffer the years Walter and Ethan had endured. Walter lived to see his great-grandchildren, passing away peacefully at 87, surrounded by the family his sacrifice had ultimately united. At his funeral, hundreds attended. People whose lives he'd touched with small acts of kindness, children he'd encouraged, families he'd helped through Lily and Ethan's foundation. One small act of compassion had indeed changed destinies, proving that God often uses the humblest hands to plant the seeds of miracles. True wealth isn't measured in what we accumulate, but in what we're willing to give when it costs us everything. Walter Briggs had $300 and gave it all away, not expecting anything in return, but trusting that education and kindness mattered more than his own comfort. That single sacrifice created ripples that transformed multiple lives across generations. When we plant seeds of compassion, we may not see the harvest immediately. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it comes back through the most unexpected paths. But love, sacrifice, and genuine kindness always find their way home. The question isn't whether blessings will return. It's whether we have the courage to plant them in the first place, even when the ground looks barren and the cost feels too high. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe to Nemi's Story. Share this with someone who needs to remember that their kindness matters, that their sacrifices aren't wasted, and that God sees every generous act, no matter how small it seems. Drop a comment telling us about a time someone's kindness changed your life. Your story might inspire someone else to plant their own seeds of compassion. Thank you for being part of this community. Until the next story, keep believing in the power of love.